Let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, not in relationships, not in self-development, not even in those quiet moments when we're alone with our thoughts. Let's talk about the whispers, not the loud, obvious moments, not the passionate declarations. I'm talking about the whispers, the subtle moments of connection, the unspoken truths. The feelings that travel under the surface, the emotions we barely let ourselves acknowledge, but that are quietly sculpting our reality. The whispers that melt on skin. I know that sounds poetic, and maybe it is, but what I'm really talking about is the smallest gestures, the quietest truths, the softest signals often carry the most power, because the people who make the biggest impact in our lives, they rarely do it with thunder. They do it with presence. They do it by seeing us, really seeing us, in ways others overlook. And the moments that change us the most don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they come as whispers that barely touch the skin, but leave marks that last forever. Maybe it was the first time someone looked at you like you mattered. Like really mattered, not for what you could do for them, or what you looked like that day, or what they wanted from you, but just for being you. Or maybe it was the time you offered that to someone else and saw them light up in a way that made you realize, this is what connection is supposed to feel like. Now, why am I talking about this? Because too many of us are chasing fireworks. We're waiting for grand gestures, constant attention, someone to scream their feelings from the rooftops. But if you've ever really been loved, or if you've ever truly loved someone, it's not about the volume, it's about the intimacy, the whisper. The problem is, we miss these moments all the time because we've trained ourselves to only value what's loud. We don't hear the whisper in our own minds that says, you're not just enough, you're incredible. We miss the whisper of encouragement in someone's eyes when we're struggling to believe in ourselves. We miss the whispered honesty of someone who's not trying to impress us, but who is trying quietly to love us in the only way they know how. We miss these whispers because we're too busy looking for shouts, and that has consequences. We start chasing people who are shiny but shallow, loud but empty, impressive but unavailable. We trade whispers for noise. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt seen, not admired, not liked, not wanted, seen? And when was the last time you offered that to someone else? Because the real magic in life, the kind of magic that changes people, that builds love, that builds self-worth, that builds a life that feels like it means something, doesn't happen through big performative acts. It happens in the micro moments. In the way you brush a strand of hair from someone's face, not because it's in the way, but because touching them feels like home. In the way someone says your name with a softness that tells you they're not just calling for your attention, they're acknowledging your existence. In the way someone listens, not to respond, not to fix, but just to hold space. Those are whispers that melt on skin, and if you're not careful, you'll miss them, because we're in a world right now that's addicted to dopamine. We want the next hit, the next text, the next like. The next compliment. But let me tell you something that will change the way you approach relationships forever. Depth doesn't live in the next. It lives in the now. It lives in the whisper that's happening in this moment. The one you may not even be hearing, because you're waiting for something louder. You see, I've coached thousands of people, and no matter how different they seem on the surface, different ages, different countries, different upbringings, one thing I've learned is this. Everyone is trying to feel safe enough to be themselves. And often, the reason we don't get the love we want isn't because we're not good enough or beautiful enough or successful enough. It's because we're too afraid to be still enough, quiet enough, vulnerable enough to hear or offer the whisper. So we perform, we play games. We wait 3 hours to reply. We pretend we don't care. We act like we're cool with casual when our soul is screaming for something real. We protect ourselves by never going deep. But you don't find love by staying on the surface. You don't create meaning by staying comfortable. You find it by leaning into the subtle, by being present, by listening so closely to someone that you begin to hear things they've never even said out loud. Let me give you a moment that changed my life. It wasn't on a stage. It wasn't during a big media interview. It wasn't at one of my retreats. It was in a kitchen with someone I cared about. We were just making tea, and I remember I was a bit out of sorts that day. My head wasn't in the right place. I was distracted, anxious. I was trying to act like everything was fine, and she just looked at me, didn't say anything big, didn't interrogate me, just softly said, "You don't have to do that here." That was it. 5 words, a whisper. But it melted something inside me because I suddenly felt safe, seen, not for what I was projecting, not for the polished, articulate version of myself, but for what I actually was in that moment. That's what changes people. That's what changes us. But we can't just wait for someone to give that to us. We have to be it for ourselves, for others. We have to start listening better, feeling deeper. Slowing down. Let me ask you something else. And again, I want your honesty. Do you ever feel like you're doing everything right, but still not getting the connection you crave? You're texting back. You're showing up. You're putting in the effort. But it feels like you're still unseen. You might be missing the whisper, because here's the truth: presence is rare. Listening, real listening, is rare. Authenticity is rare. That's why it's so powerful when we give it. When someone feels like your attention isn't a performance, but a gift, something shifts. Trust is built, vulnerability emerges, intimacy forms. But if all we offer is noise, that's all we'll attract. You can't build something lasting on a foundation of performance. Now, I know this isn't easy. Many of us didn't grow up in environments where softness was safe. Maybe you had to be loud to be heard. Maybe you had to hide your needs because expressing them got you punished or ignored. Maybe you had to earn love instead of just receiving it. And so now, whispers feel scary. Stillness feels unfamiliar. Someone truly seeing you without judgment feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is not danger, it's growth. It's the feeling of stepping out of your armor. And if you want real love, real self-worth, real fulfillment, you're going to have to let someone in. And not all at once, not recklessly, but enough to let the whisper be heard. Let the walls down just enough to feel someone's fingertips brush against who you really are. That's what vulnerability looks like. And yes, it's terrifying, but it's also the birthplace of everything beautiful. I'll leave you with this thought. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be the most powerful. You don't have to scream your worth. You don't have to chase validation. You don't have to prove anything. The most powerful presence is often the quietest. It's the energy of someone who knows who they are, who listens, who notices, who feels deeply and isn't afraid of that. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be real, because people don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with truth, with moments of realness, with the subtle glances, the gentle words, the quiet courage, with the whispers that melt on skin. And if you can learn to listen for them, if you can learn to give them, you won't just transform your relationships. You'll transform the way people feel in your presence. And even more importantly, you'll transform the way you feel in your own skin. That's where love begins. In life and love, we're often taught to look for the big moments, the declarations, the milestones, the dramatic gestures. We equate love with fireworks, chemistry with intensity, and validation with volume. But the truth is, the most powerful moments are rarely loud. They're quiet, subtle. They arrive as whispers, not shouts. That's where the real connection lives. Think about it. Some of the most memorable times in your life weren't because someone made a big scene or gave an extravagant gift. It was because they saw you. Maybe it was the way they touched your hand when you were nervous. Or the way they looked at you when you didn't feel like yourself and somehow made you feel whole again. These are the whispers that melt on skin, the soft, deeply personal gestures that don't need to be explained because they're felt intuitively, instantly. We often underestimate these moments because they don't come with fanfare, but they leave deeper impressions than anything else. Why? Because they're real. They're not curated or performed, they're raw presence. And that's rare. We live in a world where everyone is trying to be heard, seen, liked, validated. But the ones who truly move us are the ones who don't try so hard to be loud. They're the ones who are just there, not to impress, but to connect. They're tuned in. They listen with their eyes. They touch with intention. They speak with feeling. And that kind of energy doesn't just fade, it lingers. It shapes how we feel about ourselves. It makes us feel safe. And when someone makes us feel safe, we open up in ways we didn't even know we could. That's the power of the whisper. It bypasses noise and goes straight to the soul. We live in a culture that rewards volume. Social media, dating apps, even casual conversation, all push us toward being seen, being flashy, being impressive. We've been conditioned to believe that attention equals value, and so we chase the next notification, the next response, the next high. In doing so, we start mistaking noise for meaning. But real connection isn't found in the chaos, it's found in the quiet. When we're constantly chasing what's loud, we become addicted to superficial stimulation. We swipe on potential partners not because we feel anything deep, but because we want a distraction. We text back to avoid discomfort, not to nurture intimacy. We fill silence with updates and opinions instead of allowing space for truth. In that pursuit of constant motion, we overlook the subtle but powerful presence of someone who is simply there, steady, grounded, and willing to offer us something real. The irony is that the very thing we crave, being seen, being loved, being understood, is often drowned out by the noise we use to distract ourselves from our fear of being vulnerable. So we run toward the exciting, the dramatic, the unavailable, because it feels safer to chase chaos than to sit still with something genuine, something that might actually see us. But when you slow down enough to notice, you begin to realize that connection doesn't live in the next shiny moment. It lives in the way someone remembers the little details. It lives in the pause between words. It lives in how someone listens, not to fix, not to judge, but just to hear you. When you're too focused on what's loud, you miss what's lasting. You miss the quiet love, the meaningful gaze. The real intimacy that isn't trying to impress, only trying to be true. Vulnerability is one of the most misunderstood parts of human connection. We're taught to protect ourselves, to appear strong, to act like we don't need anyone. And for many people, this becomes a survival mechanism. Somewhere along the way, it felt safer to perform than to be real. But what that creates is distance, not just from others, but from ourselves. Because when we hide our truth, we also hide the parts of us that are most capable of love and being loved. A real intimacy doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with honesty. It begins with the moment you stop pretending you're okay when you're not. When you admit you're scared or confused or hurting or longing, it begins when you take off the mask and risk being seen. That risk is terrifying, especially when the world has rewarded your armor. But vulnerability is where the magic happens. It's where people stop connecting with your image and start connecting with you. The fear, of course, is that if you show who you really are, you'll be rejected. But the truth is, when you're vulnerable, two things happen. You filter out those who aren't capable of real connection. And you draw in the people who are. You give others permission to be vulnerable too. You create depth, trust, safety. These are the foundations of every meaningful relationship, not just romantic ones, but friendships, family bonds, and even the relationship you have with yourself. It takes courage to be vulnerable, to admit what you feel, to ask for what you need, to let someone close enough to hurt you. But that same courage is what makes love possible. You cannot experience the full beauty of connection while keeping the door locked. Opening it, even just a little, is how love begins to breathe. So many people go through life waiting to be chosen, to be noticed, to be loved in the way they dream of. They sit on the sidelines hoping someone will see through their silence, unlock their heart, and offer them the kind of connection that finally makes them feel safe. But the truth is, if you're always waiting to be seen, you might miss the opportunity to be the one who sees, to be the person who offers the kind of presence you're searching for in others. A real connection isn't something you sit around and hope for. It's something you actively create. And that starts by shifting from seeker to source. A, instead of scanning every room for someone who might love you the way you want, ask yourself, am I showing up as someone who gives that kind of love? Do I listen the way I want to be listened to? Do I notice the details that matter? Do I create the space where someone else feels safe enough to be real? Being the source doesn't mean overgiving or losing yourself to please others. It means choosing to be intentional. It means slowing down enough to see people, really see them. It means offering the whisper for offering the presence, the kindness, the understanding. And in doing that, you create an energy that pulls the right people toward you, not because you're shouting, but because your depth is undeniable. This isn't about performance. It's about alignment. When your actions match the kind of connection you want, the game changes. You stop chasing emotionally unavailable people. You stop accepting crumbs. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing with clarity, with strength, and with softness. That's when love finds you, not in the noise, but in your willingness to embody the quiet truth of what you deserve. In the end, everything we truly seek, love, connection, depth, meaning, it's not waiting for us in the noise or in the performance. It's in the stillness. In the presence, in the whisper, the moments that move us, that stay with us, that shape who we become, aren't always wrapped in drama or intensity. They're often gentle, subtle, intimate, and they require us to slow down enough to notice them, to hear them, and to offer them in return. You don't need to be louder, flashier, or more impressive to be loved. You just need to be real, vulnerable, present. You have the power to create connection not by doing more, but by feeling more, by showing up with your truth, and by making it safe for others to do the same. The whispers that melt on skin, they are the moments when we're fully alive, when we're honest. When we're soft in a world that constantly tells us to be hard, choose those moments, cherish them, and most importantly, be them. That's where love lives. That's where you live.